The Democratic and Republican candidates for the 85th District discussed different topics during the Coffee with the Candidates event on Friday morning. The event was hosted by the League of Women Voters of the Lewisburg area and the Greater Susquehanna Valley Chamber of Commerce.
The biggest problem I see in this district is lack of economic development. Without it, sustainability is not possible. We have two humongous, wonderful universities, but we have no retainability when it comes to keeping our students here. We have people that come in, go to the university, get a wonderful education, but there is nothing to keep them here. As a legislator, I would capitalize on the Department of Community and Economic Development. This office's mission is to support sustainability of communities in the Commonwealth. Certainly, I think that by working with them, we can find out what our greatest need is in this district and capitalize on that by working with other departments such as the Department of Labor and Industry to develop incentives for people to stay in this area. Without this sustainability, there's no growth for our area. No reason why my son would want to stay here as well as us want to stay here as well. Certainly, I think that businesses aren't going to come to our area if we don't have certain things to sustain them, such as broadband, high-speed internet. Without these basic necessities, we can't have growth. So certainly I think that I have great ideas for how to sustain this area and grow this area, and I hope to be able to do so.
Mr. Rowe? Well, we can discuss a number of issues facing the 85th District, but I believe our most pressing one at the moment is the anti-business climate being created in Pennsylvania by Governor Wolf and the Democrats in Harrisburg. As a small business owner, I know the challenges facing our business community. With the third highest corporate tax rate in the nation and ever-increasing regulatory burdens, Pennsylvania's hostile business environment is stifling economic growth and job creation. As an example, a $15 minimum wage has been proposed, and it's being pushed by my opponent and many Democrats in Harrisburg. This would be disastrous for local employers, including many who are sitting here in the audience today. A minimum wage increase would wreak havoc on small businesses and would also be devastating to residents, particularly those who are on fixed incomes, who will see rising costs and higher taxes to compensate for the increase. According to officials in the Lewisburg School District, increasing the minimum wage to $15 would cost the district $250,000, leading to even higher property taxes. The true minimum wage is and always will be zero, because that's what people make when they don't have jobs. And if you want to kill jobs and economic growth, there is no better way to do it than more government regulations like increasing the minimum wage to $15. A recent survey in New York City found that 75% of the city's restaurants are planning on cutting hours, and 47% are cutting jobs due to the new $15 minimum wage requirements. And the Independent Fiscal Office here in Pennsylvania estimates that a minimum wage increase would cost the state 54,000 jobs. We all want to see rising incomes, and to do that, we need pro-growth policies, lower taxes, and less regulation. I'm the only candidate in this race who is willing and able to advocate for these policies.
I don't particularly think there should be a specific topic that's isolated to one party or the other. I think that's what has contributed to this great polarization of not only our district, our state, but our country. When you start polarizing issues with party is when you have to force to pick a side instead of coming together and working together, which I think is something that our legislature really needs to do. Obviously, we can't even pass a budget on time because we're too worried about what side of the aisle we sit on. Again, when you're focused on what party you're voting for, you miss the forest for the trees. As a physician, my job is to assess the situation, come up with a treatment plan that is going to be best for the patient. And I think people and representatives in Congress and our legislature should do the same thing. We shouldn't worry about what side of the aisle we sit on and vote accordingly. We need to start doing what's best for the constituents in this district and quit worrying about whether we have an R or a D or an I after our name. My slogan is putting people first, not party. And I'll do the same to represent all of you when I get to Harrisburg.
Mr. Rowe?
At times, I am disappointed in my fellow Republicans because sometimes Republicans push for higher taxes and more regulations and bigger governments just like the Democrats do. I'm not one of those Republicans. I would certainly break with my caucus when they push these kind of liberal policies, and I believe my party needs to be more committed to conservative values like those shared by most Union and Snyder residents. For example, right now, some Republicans are proposing a paid family leave bill that will threaten businesses and reduce the amount of jobs in our area. An alternative to this proposal that I would support would allow workers to bank their overtime as comp time, giving employees greater flexibility without unnecessarily burdening small businesses. As a small business owner and an employer, I understand that conservative policies help promote a vibrant economy and create jobs. That's why I will fight for policies that promote economic growth, support our farming community, and provide more family-sustaining jobs. As a township supervisor, I never voted for a tax increase, I never voted for more debt, and I never voted for more government regulations. In Harrisburg, I will strongly advocate for legislators of both parties to adopt conservative principles like lower taxes, fiscal responsibility, religious liberty, limited government, and personal freedoms. I will try to take them one by one. I'll begin by this, though, that extensive research by the American University and other institutions has shown that these types of voter reforms do very little to increase voter participation. In regards to eliminating straight party voting, I absolutely support this. It is our duty as citizens of this great nation to do our due diligence in being aware of the issues facing us and understand which candidates are most qualified to address those issues. I'm not in favor of early voting or no excuse absentee voting because as a voter, I want to understand the differences between candidates and have time to formulate my opinions. Early voting encourages voters to cast their ballots before all information is known, causing early voters to be less informed because of the nature of how campaigns and media coverage unfolds. It actually encourages people to simply vote by party labels rather than to examine the candidates individually. We should all vote on the same day unless there is good reason to vote, such as being homebound or being out of town. I'm also not in favor of same-day and automatic registration. It is both expensive and overburdens an already overworked election staff. Our local election boards are having a hard enough time as it is getting enough poll workers. And same-day registration is just impractical, could force consolidation, and greatly increases the risk of mistakes that would allow ineligible to vote or even outright voter fraud. I'm also opposed to open primaries, and this is actually one issue which I agree with Union County Democrat Chairman Rick Thomas, that those voting in primaries should be registered within their party. This is a tactic favored by political activists who want to corrupt the nomination process for a party they do not support. I think Republican voters should choose Republican nominees, and Democratic voters should choose Democratic nominees.
Dr. Rager-Kay?
With the average voter turnout in a general election in this state being at the most 35 to 40%, and that's a conservative estimate, I certainly think that any limitation on a constituent patient, I'm in the business mode here, any limitation on a constituent's right to exercise this voting right would severely continue to limit this. Certainly, I agree with my opponent. There are issues that we need to consider when it comes to certain things like open primary, same-day registration. The issue I have as a working mother, it certainly is difficult to make sure I'm either at the polls early enough to vote or after work when I'm trying to relax and take care of my family and enjoy family time, being able to find the time to get to the polls. As a proponent of a small business, certainly I think people would understand the fact that it's not always feasible to make sure that you have time to go there. As a physician, as a surgeon, my days are long, and I certainly want to make sure I have the opportunity to vote. Open primaries, the issue I have with this, it's restricting third-party voters. Once again, it's forcing you to pick a side, Republican or Democrat, and basically saying to you, if you don't choose one or the other, your vote doesn't count, your voice doesn't matter. So certainly, I am a proponent of open primaries for that reason. Are there issues that may come up? Are there problems that we may encounter? Absolutely. But why restrict the ability to exercise your right to vote?
Well, America's drug problem does go deeper than substance abuse. It goes to the root of the erosion of the family unit. Research clearly shows that a cohesive family unit results in improved child behavior, health, communication, and opportunity. If parents do not take time to communicate and spend time with their children, the odds of those children having substance abuse issues eventually goes way up. And the American Psychologist has published research showing a successful nuclear family provides children with consistency and caretaking. Children with stability and consistency in their lives are more likely to exhibit positive behavior, earn good grades in school, and become more involved in community and extracurricular activities. The nuclear family eats dinner together regularly, maybe goes to church, takes family vacations, all of which strengthen relationships and build a solid foundation for future life goals. We need to cultivate a culture that celebrates familial bonds and improves communication and accountability. As far as the prescription drug problem, we have Obamacare and the Democrats to thank for making it easier to prescribe and obtain high-powered painkillers, creating many new addicts who may never have had substance abuse issues. You need look no farther than the Forbes analysis that showed Obamacare was directly responsible for the pharmaceutical industry seeing $10 to $35 billion in additional profits over the decade following Obamacare's passage into law.
Dr. Rager-Kay?
My opponent is correct. It goes far beyond being addicted to a certain substance. It goes within mental health and addiction services, which, by the way, are all funding programs that have been cut. If we want to talk about whether it's a Democratic House or a Republican House, when we look at funding for these services that will detrimentally decrease the opioid crisis, these funding programs have been cut year after year. And that certainly becomes one of the biggest issues. The other issue is not so much that Obamacare was to blame for the increase in the opioid crisis in this area, but our own very past Congressman, Tom Marino, can certainly be brought up as an issue of why this area boomed with opioid prescriptions. It's easier for patients to receive them when you have pharmaceutical companies paying doctors in this area incentives in order to prescribe the opioids. It's fine and dandy for any layperson to say what they think is the cause of the opioid crisis. But if you want a real expert, then you send a doctor to Harrisburg. You send someone who is seeing this every day, seeing this, knowing that as a physician, our class of professionals is primarily to blame for why the opioid crisis is the reason it is today. We were taught to treat pain to a level of 0, and now we're seeing the cost of that. So who better to fix it than the class of people that caused it? And that's when you send a doctor to Harrisburg, which we have 0 right now in our state legislature. Look, I stand before you as a citizen, as a constituent of this district, just like you. I don't pretend to be better than you, and I don't pretend to be better than any person that could possibly hold this position. But I can promise you one thing. I am more qualified than my opponent. I'm more qualified in life experiences. As a physician, I have a unique opportunity to know what it's like to take care of people regardless of who they are. I'm not going to try to polarize this district any more than it already is. As a wife and a mother, I know what it's like to struggle as a 2-income family, 2 worker families trying to balance that, knowing what it's like to struggle to raise a 6-year-old in these days. Not easy. Certainly, I stand before you and can promise you that I am the most dedicated and passionate candidate before you. I have been through this. I went through the 2018 campaign and election, wonderful experience, and it certainly is going to carry forward knowing who the people of our district are, who we are to take care of, and we're in this together as a team. I think one thing to keep in mind is the fact that I stand before you as the most qualified, but also the most experienced, knowing the importance of the foundation of public education, knowing the importance of property tax. It's important, and it's easy to stand up and say to you that we don't need to raise minimum wage when you've never had to live on your own and pay and struggle for taxes and bills and mortgages. Certainly, As a physician, I face these challenges on a daily basis as a wife and a mother. Most importantly, I'm determined to make sure that my 6-year-old son has an ability to grow up in a sustained economy and a constituency who will be there for him.
So first of all, I'm not quite sure what my opponent is insinuating. I've already paid thousands of dollars in property taxes and paid money on my mortgage for my home that I do own in East Buffalo Township. Also, I pay thousands of dollars in Social Security and employer taxes as job creators do. So I pay plenty in taxes. I do want to thank the Chamber and everyone for being here tonight. I want to thank Jen for our spirited discussion. The race is not about whether you choose to vote for my opponent or me. It really is not about us, but about the values and positions we will all be advocating for in the legislature. And the choice comes down to whether you want someone representing you in Harrisburg that will push the big government, high tax, and liberal agenda of Governor Wolf and the Democrats. Or do you want someone like me who will fight for smaller taxes and less regulation and will promote policies that will foster economic growth? I have the proven experience as a public official and a small business owner, and I can hit the ground running on day one. I understand this district, and I respect and share the values of the hardworking people of the 85th District. Unlike my opponent, I am fully committed to being a full-time legislator and working around the clock on behalf of everyone in this room. At a salary that is more than double what the average person in Union and Snyder County makes, the salary dictates a full-time job. As a local small business owner and community leader, I understand the importance of a vibrant regional economy. And that's why I fight for policies that encourage economic growth, support our farming community, and provide family-sustaining jobs. As an East Buffalo Township supervisor, I held the line against increasing the size of government, maintained balanced budgets, never incurred more debt, or supported more government regulations. I will bring those same conservative principles to Harrisburg. As a solid conservative, I will be a voice for our values in Harrisburg. I humbly ask for your vote on August 20th, and thank you all for being here today.